I'll come for the full $1,900 tonight. Don't you dare spend a cent. My son barked over the phone, as if my pension already belonged to him. For 2 years. He and his wife had pushed me out of my own bedroom, spent my money, ignored the bills, and treated my late husband's garage like trash. But that evening, when they walked through my front door demanding cash, they found their luxury furniture gone, a lease agreement on the kitchen table, and the very man they hired to clear my garage calmly drinking coffee across from me. My son's face went white before I even said a word. Lesson: never mistake a mother's silence for surrender, especially when her name is still on the deed. The phone buzzed against the kitchen counter just as I finished washing my breakfast plate. I saw my son's name on the screen. Mark rarely called me during his workday unless his besides Chloe had instructed him to. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, took a slow breath, and answered, "Mom, did your pension clear?" Mark didn't bother with a greeting. His voice was rushed, carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "Yes, it arrived this morning," I replied softly, keeping my tone neutral. "Good. I'll come for the full $1,900 tonight. Don't you dare spend a cent," he said. The words clipped and authoritative. "Chloe found a great deal on those patio furniture sets she wanted. We need your share to cover the joint expenses. Have the cash ready by 6. He hung up before I could remind him that my pension was supposed to pay for my groceries and medication. Not luxury outdoor seating I was rarely allowed to use. I set the phone down. The house was perfectly quiet, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Over the past 2 years, my own home had slowly been transforming into a place where I was treated as an unpaid maid and an ATM. I walked over to the mail pile Chloe had left on the hall table. She always sorted the mail, tossing my letters onto a small tray as if doing me a favor. Today, a heavy envelope from the utility company had slipped out of her neat stack. I opened it. The electricity bill was 3 months past due. A cold realization washed over me. I had been handing Mark and Chloe my money every month to cover these exact bills. They had promised to manage the household finances so I wouldn't have to stress. Instead, they were spending my retirement on themselves and ignoring the basic upkeep of the house my late husband and I had paid off decades ago. It started with a simple request. 2 years ago, Mark and Chloe asked to move in for 6 months to save for a down payment on their own house. I agreed instantly. I was a widow living alone in a 4-bedroom house. And I missed my son. I thought we would share meals, watch television together, and build a new chapter as a family. Instead, Chloe began a quiet, calculated takeover. First, she mentioned that the master bedroom had better light for her morning yoga routine before I fully understood what was happening. I found myself packing my clothes and moving into the cramped guest room at the end of the hall. She used a soft, reasonable voice, always framing her demands as logical necessities. "You don't really need all that space, do you, Eleanor? It just makes sense for us to have it." Mark always nodded along, avoiding my eyes. He hated conflict, especially with his wife. So he chose the easiest path: silence. He let her rearrange the kitchen, throw out my favorite armchair, and dictate the grocery list. If we had guests over, Chloe was the picture of a devoted daughter-in-law, serving tea and smiling brightly. But the moment the door closed, she treated me like an inconvenience. I was expected to keep the house spotless, do their laundry, and prepare dinner by the time they returned from work. Whenever I tried to set a small boundary, Mark would sigh and say, "Mom, she's stressed from work. Just let her have this. Don't make a big deal out of nothing." So I stayed quiet. I made myself smaller and smaller to keep the peace. I told myself that family required sacrifice, and that, eventually, they would appreciate what I was doing. But standing here with the unpaid electric bill in my hand, the illusion finally shattered. I placed the unpaid utility bill back on the hall table, my mind racing. I needed a glass of water to steady my nerves. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed a bright yellow sticky note plastered to the center of the refrigerator door. Chloe's sharp, looping handwriting stared back at me. Eleanor makes sure the garage is completely unlocked by noon. The clearance crew is coming to haul away the old junk. I've scheduled contractors to start measuring for my home gym tomorrow morning. I read the words 3 times, waiting for the shock to subside. The old junk was Arthur's woodworking equipment, his oak workbench, pegboards, and the half-finished birdhouse he had left behind. The garage was the only place Chloe had not fully taken from me. She hadn't asked. She had simply decided what would happen to my property. My trembling stopped, and 2 years of sadness hardened into focus. I didn't cry or call Mark. Pleading had never worked. They thought silence meant weakness. But they had forgotten one thing: only my name was on the deed. I took the sticky note down, folded it into a neat square, and slipped it into my pocket. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was 9 in the morning. I had 3 hours before the clearance crew arrived. My first stop was the bank. The morning air was crisp, and for the first time in months, I walked with my shoulders pulled back. I sat across from the branch manager, a polite man named David who had known Arthur and me for decades. I handed him my identification and gave a simple, direct instruction. I need to close the joint checking account immediately, and I need to reroute my monthly pension into a new private account. I said. David clicked his mouse a few times, his brow furrowing. Mrs. Miller, your son Mark is listed as a joint owner on this account. I can remove your funds, but closing it entirely requires his signature. However, I can certainly stop your pension from depositing there. That will do, I replied smoothly. Transfer every dollar of my pension to a new account, solely in my name. I also need to withdraw the exact amount Mark demanded for today in cash. Not everything could be finalized in one morning. David explained that the pension reroute might take a few business days to fully process, and that closing the old account would require Mark's signature. But the most important part was immediate no future deposit would go there without my approval. And the money already in my name could be moved safely today. I watched as David completed the paperwork. When he handed me the thick envelope of cash, I didn't put it in my purse to hand over to my son. I placed it securely in my inner coat pocket. It was my money, earned from my years of teaching and Arthur's savings. It would stay mine. Next, I drove to the hardware store. I purchased 3 heavy-duty padlocks, a set of new doorknobs with industrial-grade locks, and a wireless security camera. I didn't buy the cheap ones. I bought the most robust hardware on the shelf. The young clerk at the counter looked at me curiously as he rang up the heavy metal items. Changing some doors around the house. Ma'am? He asked with a friendly smile. Just establishing some new boundaries. I answered, returning his smile. I drove home feeling a strange sense of liberation. The fear of confrontation was gone, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of taking practical action. I pulled into my driveway just before 11. A large white box truck was already parked by the curb, and 2 men in thick canvas work shirts were walking up to my front door. I stepped out of my car and greeted them before they could even ring the bell. Good morning, I said, my voice steady and clear. Are you the clearance crew scheduled by Chloe? The taller man, who had a clipboard tucked under his arm, nodded. Yes, ma'am, I'm Marcus. We're here to clear out a garage and haul the items to the local dump. I walked up to Marcus and pulled a folded document from my purse. It was a copy of the property deed and my matching photo ID. I handed it to him. Marcus, I am Eleanor Miller, I am the sole owner of this property. My daughter-in-law did not have the authority to order the disposal of the items in that garage. Marcus frowned, looking from the deed to my face. Oh, look, ma'am. We don't want to get involved in any family disputes. We just go where the job tells us. I understand, I replied calmly. And I am not canceling your job. I am simply redirecting it. You are already booked and paid for the next 3 hours. Correct? Yes, ma'am, he said slowly, still cautious. Good. I have a different hauling job for you. Stabi. Instead of clearing the garage, I need you to move several items out of my living room and pack them securely inside the garage. Nothing goes to the dump. Everything just gets relocated on the property. Marcus stepped aside and called his office. A minute later, he returned. Mrs. Miller, we can't remove anything from your garage without your authorization, he said. But if you want a different job, documented on the same property, we can proceed. I nodded. Then document it. Nothing leaves today. I smiled and unlocked the front door, swinging it wide open. Right this way. Gentlemen, let's get to work. I stood in the center of the living room and pointed. That smart television, the espresso machine, the designer rugs, and the velvet sofa, all of it goes to the garage. Marcus and his partner didn't waste any time. They were professionals, working efficiently to unplug cords, roll up the expensive rugs Chloe had bought with my money, and carefully lift the heavy velvet sofa she had placed right where Arthur's old recliner used to sit. They carried item after item down the hallway and neatly stacked them in the empty bays of the garage, right next to Arthur's untouched woodworking bench. As the living room slowly emptied, it felt as though I could finally breathe again, the suffocating presence of Chloe's pretentious, controlling aesthetic was being stripped away piece by piece, once the main living spaces were cleared of her possessions. I directed the men to the kitchen. We boxed up her expensive blender, her specialized dietary supplements, and her imported dishware. I didn't touch anything in the master bedroom where they slept. I wasn't being malicious. I was simply removing their footprint from my communal spaces. I was taking back the heart of my home. When they finished, the living room looked wonderfully bare, echoing slightly when I walked across the original hardwood floors. I walked out to the garage, paid Marcus a generous cash tip from the envelope I had withdrawn earlier, and thanked them for their hard work. After the truck left, I secured the garage doors and changed the interior lock. Arthur's tools were safe, and Chloe's belongings were stored untouched beside the wall. I taped a note to the door. Your belongings are safe. You may collect them tomorrow between 10 a.m. and noon. While I am present, nothing in Arthur's workspace is to be touched. With the physical space secured, I changed the Wi-Fi password. Then I called the utility companies and removed my card from any future payments. I could not force Mark and Chloe to take over without signatures, but I could stop my pension from covering bills they had promised to pay. I placed the overdue notices beside the lease agreement. Then I drafted a plain month-to-month lease market rent for the master bedroom, plus a flat utility fee. I printed 2 copies and placed them beside the unpaid bills. Some calls would take time to finalize, but by 5 o'clock, I had done what I legally could. I had stopped the bleeding. By 5 o'clock, the house was quiet. The sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the empty living room floor. I went into the kitchen, made myself a simple, comforting dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables, and set a single place for myself at the head of the table. A knock came at the door. Marcus had returned with the updated work order, confirming that nothing had left the property. My office wanted you to have a signed copy, he said. Thank you. Marcus, I made coffee if you'd like a cup before you go. He sat across from me. A few minutes later, I heard a key turn in the front door lock. The front door pushed open, and Mark's voice echoed down the hallway before he even rounded the corner. "Mom, we're home. I told you I needed the cash by 6. You better not have gone." His voice cut off abruptly as he stepped into the living room. I didn't have to see his face to know what he was looking at. The empty space where the velvet sofa used to be. The bare floors. The missing television. Chloe walked in right behind him, letting out a sharp gasp. "Mark, we've been robbed!" she shrieked, dropping her designer handbag on the floor. "Call the police! Everything is gone!" They rushed into the kitchen, panicking, only to stop dead in their tracks. There I was, sitting calmly at the head of the table, sipping my coffee, and sitting right across from me, a large, broad-shouldered man in a canvas work shirt, casually drinking from one of my favorite mugs. Mark's face went completely pale. His eyes darted from Marcus's imposing figure to my serene expression, and finally to the neat stacks of paper resting on the table. "Mom?" Mark stammered, his bravado entirely vanishing. "What? Who is this? What happened to the living room?" Chloe pushed past him, her face flushed with sudden anger. "Who is this man? Eleanor, where is my furniture? Did you let someone steal our things?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the mug down on the coaster, and looked directly into Chloe's eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. Nobody stole anything. "Chloe," I said smoothly, "Marcus here runs a very efficient clearance crew, the one you hired this morning without asking me. I simply redirected his efforts. Your belongings are perfectly safe, packed away in the garage." Chloe's jaw dropped. You locked my things in the garage. Give me the keys right now. Your things are safe." I replied, "You can collect them tomorrow morning, with me present and with everything written down. What you cannot do is use my garage, my husband's tools, or my home as if I no longer exist." "No," I said simply. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Chloe blinked, as if she couldn't comprehend the syllable. "Excuse me?" I said no, I repeated, gesturing to the papers on the table. "I own this house. My name is on the deed. The garage is my late husband's space, and it will remain so. You are not building a gym there, and you are no longer treating my communal areas as your personal showroom." Mark stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, you can't just do this. We live here too. You're overreacting. Where is the pension cash I asked for?" "The money is safe in my private account," I said, sliding the unpaid bills toward him. "I removed my card from future payments. From now on, you can pay your share directly or put the accounts in your own names." I then tapped the 2 printed lease agreements. "You moved in to save money, but instead, you took over my life. From now on, you are tenants. This is a standard lease for the master bedroom. You will pay me market rent on the 1st of every month, and you will respect my boundaries in the shared spaces." Chloe crossed her arms, her face turning a mottled red. "We are not signing that. This is ridiculous. We're family. You can't charge us rent." "You're right. You don't have to sign it," I agreed softly, maintaining perfect eye contact. "But if you don't sign it, and you don't pay the first month's rent by tomorrow morning, I will give you written notice. You will have 30 days to pack your bedroom and find another place to live. The choice is yours." Marcus finished his coffee, stood up respectfully, and tipped his hat to me before quietly letting himself out the front door. For a long moment, the kitchen was completely silent. Mark stared at the lease agreement as if it were written in a foreign language. Chloe opened her mouth to argue again, her usual sharp retorts forming on her lips, but when she looked at me, she stopped. She saw that the quiet, compliant woman she had manipulated for 2 years was gone, and no amount of bullying would bring her back. Mark finally looked down. "Mom, I didn't know you felt this way. We didn't mean to take over. Intentions matter less than actions." "Mark," I said, my voice softening just a fraction, but remaining firm. "I love you, but I will no longer allow you to disrespect me under my own roof." Without another word, Chloe turned on her heel and marched down the hallway to the master bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Mark lingered for a second, looking at the bills, before picking them up and slowly following his wife. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was peaceful. I walked out to the kitchen, made my coffee, and sat in the bright, empty living room. I didn't know if they would sign the lease or pack their bags, and to my surprise, I found that I was perfectly fine with either outcome if they stayed. It would be on my terms. They would pay their share, respect my space, and treat me as the owner of the house. If they left, I would reclaim my master bedroom, unpack my favorite chairs, and perhaps finally finish Arthur's birdhouse in the garage. I took a sip of my coffee, watching the morning sunlight stretch across the bare hardwood floor. For the first time in years, the air in my home felt light. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need a lawyer, and I didn't need to be cruel. I just needed to remember my own worth, and I knew I would never forget it again. Thank you for listening. If Eleanor's story resonated with you, tell us. In the comments, have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you loved? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about life, family, and resilience.